I mean, I felt, as I've said, that I'd stumbled, really by accident, into a kind of laboratory in which technical and artistic innovations were being elaborated that were at least a decade ahead of the gastronomical world as I had known it up to that time. So with this feeling still resonating in my thoughts 3 years later, and trying to preserve that feeling, I'm also going to speak to the people in my course on Heidegger right now, and we're talking about art, and one of the topics is the preservation of art. Trying to preserve that feeling, I proposed to the University of Aberdeen that we confer upon Ferran Adrià an honorary degree recognizing his contributions to cuisine and to modern thought. As it turned out, no chef before him had ever been honored in this manner by the Academy. The event went unnoticed in Scotland, but made the headlines at least in Spain and Germany. Now, one of the most difficult one of the most difficult questions I had to face at the time of the event was Adrià's own. He asked me almost right at the outset, did I recognize the full importance of this event? Do you realize what you've done in giving an honorary degree to a chef? And I said, well, no. I had to acknowledge that I certainly didn't appreciate it enough, and he proceeded to give me something like a 24-hour masterclass on the history of cuisine and his contributions to cuisine. Unfortunately, it was in Spanish, so I found myself at the end having to accept this invitation to think about his contributions to modern thought and, in some sense, reconstruct what I had learned what I should have learned in that 24 hours. So I committed myself to elaborating some of my own answers as to why this was important, that a chef was being honored in the context of modern thought. Since that time, of course, I seize every opportunity to explore the question of taste. I mean that practically, of course, and you can imagine how demanding this is. And I've been trying as much as I can to think about cuisine, to try to grasp the questions posed by contemporary cuisine, to thought, and in the context of art. So that's why I'm returning to the topic tonight, hoping at least to provoke a few responses that will help me advance a little bit in my thinking on this topic. I have to say, one of my real ambitions, if you go to the Museum of Modern Art, you will find books about cuisine in the section of the shop which has dishware and various different technical aids for cooking. There's a whole section there devoted to cooking. It's quite interesting, and you'll find some cookbooks there. If you go, and interestingly enough, in that shop, those of you who know it, there's a wall, and then there's a rather restricted space where they have the books. I've always been frustrated by that. It's like it's very cramped. You wonder what exactly is being said here. Anyway, if you cross the wall, you won't find any books on cuisine. Cuisine is entirely, in that it's categorized with these technical innovations that are part of design and moment. But a thought of this design in cuisine does not exist on the other side of the wall. And so my ambition in trying to write about this would be to get a book on the other side of the wall at the Museum of Modern Art. Unfortunately, a book has just come out, which is probably going to make it. It's entitled Food for Thought, which is co-edited. I recommend this to you. It's really a quite beautiful book. It's co-edited by Richard Hamilton, the artist, and Vicente Todoli, who, if I'm not mistaken, is at least the director, co-director of the Tate. So I've been scooped, but nevertheless, that's the ambition. In some sense, to try to think about cuisine. Now, I'm certainly not the only one doing this. It's starting to happen all over the place. Berit, who is my assistant in the course, I don't know where she is, but she is. I know she's quite ahead of me on this kind of stuff. So I'm not blazing any paths here. Let me at least acknowledge that. Okay. So I took up then, as I said before, I took up the task in this paper of working with a few of Nancy's propositions concerning the arts and the image in order to try to approach the very singular creative practice of Adrià and his team at elBulli. A restaurant which, as I've said, is as much a laboratory as it is an atelier, and which is never without an element of theater. I hope, as I said, to put some of Nancy's propositions to the test or to the fire and see how they come out. Time being limited in this exercise, however, I won't really be able to do more than explore a few dimensions of the guiding artistic intention of elBulli, which they state is to provide for its clients what they call an experience. I'll also try to suggest why I'm tempted to borrow a phrase from Mallarmé to suggest the nature of the experimentation involved at elBulli. As some of you will know, and I'm citing from memory, Mallarmé went to the UK, to Oxford, I think, and announced in a most dramatic and beautiful flair, "On a touché au vers." We've been fooling around with the verse form. And I think in a certain sense one could say of elBulli, they've been fooling around with taste. So I turn toward Nancy's reflections on the image in order to think this artistic practice of cuisine, because I'm particularly interested in the play of mimesis and methexis, participation that one encounters there. It's true that in approaching Adrià, one is tempted to pass directly to the question of art and technology, and to seek to describe what might be called, following Nancy, a technology of the ground in Adrià's practice. Nancy uses this phrase, une technologie du fond. And of course, he's thinking of the sens du monde, the sense of the world, technology of this sense of the world. And that is appropriate, and I'll be touching upon that in relation to art. But I want to be a little bit careful not to jump immediately into this question of art and technology, because I think it's easy to miss some of the artistic dimensions in this culinary practice by focusing attention too quickly on the theme of molecular gastronomy and everything that Adrià and his team have learned from Hervé Thys, the French scientist. This is a particularly strong temptation if one's aim is to contain this gastronomic affirmation. That's a phrase from Nancy, which I think is really unsettling. But anyway, this gastronomic affirmation. And this is actually what we saw in Scotland when we presented Adrià to the public. The press was not interested, and when they responded, they said, "Well, you know, we've had enough on this molecular gastronomy stuff." And I had to point back and say, "Well, that's not exactly what's going on." But anyway, the chefs, interestingly enough, were afraid to come cook for him. They all found reasons not to be available at that time. So there was this non-event in Scotland in relation to Adrià. And there was this attempt, in some sense, to contain it. And I think that's significant in itself. But there is also a second reason for beginning with the image, because a more formal approach, one that would concentrate on Adrià's concepts, and one of these, interestingly enough, is deconstruction. He's developed quite some length, the notion of the deconstruction of a dish. A concentration on these concepts risks missing what Roland Barthes recognized as vital to any discourse on cuisine, namely that it should provoke desire. Now, I can't guarantee I'll attain that last goal, but I'm well aware that I'm not enough of a cook to achieve this aim by providing a deconstructive analysis of recipes. And I certainly won't do it through a conceptual analysis of Adrià's notion of deconstruction or adaptation. So I've chosen to place the accent on art and try to see how the image is mobilized in the distended time of a meal as conceived by Ferran Adrià. Can one really speak of an image in cuisine? Nancy suggests one can, and I think that he is correct, certainly correct, in the case of a cuisine that veers, as Adrià does, into the domain of art and starts to present the presentation of a dish. And this is especially the case when the thing prepared is presented in what Jean-Luc calls its sameness. I'm going to cite Jean-Luc in just a moment about this, but let me first cite his assertion that there is an image in cuisine. He says the image. This is in this is a text in a statement in Au fond des images. The image throws into